All right, guys, we're back. We have Brian Hallblight in the quiet, trusty office there. I see Brian.
Oh yeah, down at the lease trying to get some work done. Well, I got a day off, so having a little bit of equipment problems, which all of our listeners can relate to that. So I won't bellyache too much because everybody else is going through the same thing.
Yeah, no, I hear you there. It's always Murphy's Law there, buddy. But good work getting down there and getting that work done. And we have a very special guest today. We have Mr. Jake Hofer from Exodus Trail Cameras, Exodus Outdoor Gear. What's up, Jake?
I don't know about very special, but I appreciate you guys having me on here today.
Of course. No, you're very special. We've been talking about having you on for a couple of weeks now. Finally got it done here, and we're going to cover like a myriad of things today. One, let's talk about who you are, where you're from, and what you do for a living, all that good stuff, and then we'll keep right on moving.
Cool. Yeah. My name's Jake Hofer, born and raised in Illinois. I've been working with Exodus, I think, knocking on 5 years now, and I handle a lot of the sales and marketing, brand, positioning, and everything else. And we have a podcast, Trail Cam Radio, and then another project called the Land Podcast, which is housed underneath Exodus, but I also have my Illinois broker's license and do some real estate. So it's been a very fun and exciting last 5 years. Everyone always used to say like, oh, time goes faster the older you get. And I always kind of thought it was BS. And then tomorrow's my birthday. I turned 27 and I still feel like 21 or 22 mentally. So it's strange.
Well, you're still a young buck, Jake. Once you hit 30, everything goes downhill in terms of health and age and gray hair and soreness and everything else. So live it up, brother. Live it up while you can.
I'm going to enjoy these next 3 years then.
And you're in Illinois, correct?
Yeah. Yep.
Awesome. And the Land Podcast, let's hear a little bit about that. I know we'll cover that here at the end a little bit, but you started a new podcast recently. Brian and I have both been on it, which is awesome. Thanks for that.
Yeah, well, thanks for coming on. So the Land Podcast, it's under Exodus, and it was something that I wanted to start for a while. And finally, I think it was a January day, and I was like, I had 2 in the bank, and I just like press publish. I was like, okay, better get to recording here. And the goal of it was just simply, the mailman's here. So just 1 second.
Sure, no worries.
So, and basically the whole goal of the podcast and platform was, as a broker and as a hopefully prospective land buyer at some point, I was like, there is a ton of information on just about anything investing, anything else in the subcategories of real estate, like to the point where you couldn't consume all of it, but there was not a single piece of content or information talking to people that want to buy recreational hunting land. And I felt with people that I've talked with that had bought multiple pieces, I'm like, these guys know what's going on. Like, they are well-oiled machines at this point. And then I'm talking to other potential prospective first-time land buyers, and there's just too big of a gap between the two. And my whole goal was just to kind of close the two to level the playing field and just help people figure out, is this something that they can realistically do? What do they need to prioritize in their life to make it happen if they really do want to do it? And man, it's been so much fun. It's been an extremely refreshing project up to this point. I think I'm up to 9 or 10 episodes every single Monday. We try to drop them.
Awesome, guys. So if you haven't heard of the Land Podcast before, be sure to check that out everywhere you can find a podcast. I'll listen to mine on iTunes or the podcast app or whatever. So way to launch that. That's awesome. Now, I guess let's stay on the land and the real estate side of things. So that Land Podcast, did you follow your own goal directions to help you buy your own first piece? Because we just heard some interesting news. Congratulations. You got a new farm.
Yeah, this is breaking news. I haven't broken on my own podcast here yet. So yes and no. I graduated from college. I had a full tuition scholarship for the first 2 years of my schooling. School closed, went to the cheapest state school. I did have to take out some student loans. I think I'm like one of the first generation of my direct lineage to get a college degree. So that was a goal to nail that down. So Congrats. I did that. Appreciate it. Yeah. And then so got my education, and then I started working with Exodus directly, which is, a startup in the outdoor industry. I'll be the first to say the pay wasn't lucrative, but I don't know. I caught some breaks and I ended up paying off all my student loans and then just kept saving money. driving a crappy car, living way below my means. And then I actually got my real estate license my senior year of college as well. And so I just kind of had this try to have some level of a dual income with myself and try to, balance two jobs. And so the long and short of it is, yes, I followed a lot of the principles and a lot of the advice that I got from people like yourselves and everyone else that I've crossed paths with. And I felt pretty well, I would say right now, pretty decently polished, but I'm sure when I look back in 10 years, I'll be like, oh, I should have done this instead. But right now I'm blindly confident with what I've done.
Well, good. Yeah, there's nothing wrong with it. Yeah, and plus you've been saving the money, living below your means before you started the podcast. So I mean, I guess I already knew the answer to that question, but it's good to see that you're helping people achieve that goal, and then you achieve that goal the same year you launched your podcast. Is pretty cool.
Yeah, and it's really crazy, and it's been the feedback that I've got so far that people have reached out. They're just really gracious to have people that have already gone through the process, because there's so many nuances to where you can just even get a half a point break on with your interest rate on a large loan. That's a huge deal. Or maybe you are able to buy it 5% cheaper than what you could have if you didn't hear a tip from someone. So, I mean, there's a lot of small advice that can make a huge impact with, whatever you end up doing.
For sure. So tell us about this farm a little bit, as much as you're willing to share.
Yeah. So one thing that I wanted to do, I wanted something that I could drive by every day if I wanted to. Not to say that I would, and not to say that I would walk it every day or anything else like that, but I wanted something that was relatively close to where I sleep. And there's an array of those reasons. I guess I was kind of spoiled growing up. A lot of the farms that I hunted were pretty close to where I lived. And so I wanted to have that. So that checked this off. And one thing that I've noticed with people that we've talked with and traveling with Whitetail Cribs and everything else that I've learned from over the years, and you can look at this on any map or any state, is following river systems where river systems meet big ag. And this farm checks that box as well. Just over my years, that's the majority of, I would probably say almost 90% of Boone and Crockett bucks are shot in my area. I mean, there'll still be some big ones killed out on more of the big ag, but my goal is to be within a mile or two of the bluffs or right where that meets. And that's where this farm is. So that was a big one for me. And it's obviously along the river system as well, which have just ran cameras in those types of areas and worked at duck clubs when I was in high school and in grade school. So I just kind of had an affinity towards that. So that was some of the other big things. And the other item was not necessarily super concerned with tillable income or anything else like that. Honestly, for Illinois, recreational pieces of ground, taxes are super cheap. So it wasn't like you have to really offset the annual taxes for the property. This parcel that I bought, it's like dirt cheap. It's $50 a year for taxes. So it's not it's not even worth, trying to scrounge up, some income to cover that. But the other thing was just being patient, but realistically, I haven't really been that patient, but I have a mental checklist of like, these are the farms that I would buy if I ever had the opportunity. And this was one of them, and it just happened to work out. So kind of a long-winded, sporadic answer, but that's kind of my mental checklist.
No, that's awesome. And tell me a little bit more about the $50 in taxes. I might be buying a new farm in Illinois, because I'm getting a lot more than that here on my 15 acres.
Yeah, I don't know. It's if it's timber tracks, it's just so cheap. I mean, and if you now straight tillable, like a square 80 of black dirt, it's expensive.
Okay.
It's really expensive, but what is quote unquote worthless to the state of Illinois? Pretty cheap taxes. So I'm happy about that. Yeah. And there's a lot of parcels. I've sold some parcels that were other, straight timber tracks, and a lot of them are sub $100. I mean, these are, 40 to 35 to 65 acre parcels, but I mean, it saves you a lot of money versus paying $1,000 or $800 a year in taxes of dead money.
Oh, yeah. Well, yeah, and land in Illinois is not cheap. So if you buy an expensive piece of, with some tillable on it, that's going, what I've heard, 5, 6, 7, 8 an acre.
Oh no, tillable now is like, oh my God. I've seen 3 tracks at auction this year sell for $16,000 an acre.
Oh my gosh!
Swear.
Wow.
Yeah, it's where I'm at. It's if it's a relatively like 130 PI, which that's a state Illinois, statistic of what they use to value farm ground productivity. I mean, 10, 11, 12 is like the norm.
Wow.
And if
Jeez.
it's kind of crappy, it's probably between. There's really nothing that goes in the fives anymore. So in other words, yeah, land is absolutely astronomical around here right now. We're in another big boom of tillable ag ground.
So what size piece would that be for 16 an acre? What kind of chunks are going for
Good
that?
question.
Those are big pieces. There was one over
Wow.
100 acres that went for that.
Oh
Yeah.
my gosh.
Yeah. Yeah. Crazy. And there's, 13. I look at the land sales bulletin. So I pay, I think it's $500 a year to look at these stats. And it is crazy. I mean, even the off market deals that you don't see. I mean,
Right.
like I said, I would say where I'm at, tillable goes between 10 and 13 an acre. Like some of the southern parts of the state. I mean, Illinois is some of the most productive soil on earth. So you have that, but it's crazy. Yeah. If to be a first generational farmer, impossible, I think. You can't,
No kidding.
you couldn't buy that. Yeah.
Now,
So as
go
far
ahead,
as no, good. If you have something, I was gonna pivot on to his plans unless you got something to follow up on.
I was just wondering if that soil being so healthy, near the farm ground, you think that has anything to do with some of the river system, or maybe the bucks getting big have to do with some of the river system soil as well? You know, things getting washed down over time, nutrients building up, that sort of thing. Any thoughts on that?
It begs the question, if you look at, for whatever reason, where I'm at, there's a history of large typical bucks just in general. I don't know if, the Boone and Crockett says that's because of low pressure, and because of that, it allows deer to grow without abnormalities. But in my opinion, there's pockets of the state that have incredible non-typical genetics, and there's areas of the state that have fantastic typical genetics, and I'm in an area with good typical genetics. So I don't know what that is, whether it is the soil or it has to do with the glaciers a gazillion years ago. I don't know. Right. But I know where there's river, bluffs, and super productive dirt, that's where I would want to be.
Gotcha. How tall are these bluffs that you're speaking in generalities? How would you say?
It's funny because I always thought they're like, man, these are some pretty good bluffs here. And then we went to Buffalo County, Wisconsin, and I was like, I'm on like a fourth or quarter, like a quarter or half scale of what is there. So I would say, elevation changes around 200 foot, maybe 200 feet or so. Nothing like Buffalo County, because I was like, holy cow, it's just like everything was times 2 to what I'm here. So that definitely added an interesting perspective.
Yeah, genetics, something pretty interesting. I never really paid much attention to it. I saw a post on Facebook not long ago, and I think it was like a commercial deer farmer out of Ohio. And I guess they call it genetic stacking, because I asked my buddy Danny Warner, who we've had on the show. He used to do some of that. I don't think he was large scale in the grown big antlers or anything, but he did some captive deer work throughout his lifetime. So I guess when they stack those genetics with the top quality females and the males, they can get those insane racks on a 2-year-old. And it's just like, how in the heck can they do that? And I guess maybe Illinois has a lot of super good genetics to go along with everything else, and it's just like the perfect storm.
Yeah, it begs the question. I don't know. And something I kind of took for granted, to be honest. I thought as a kid, I was like, man, I just want to kill a deer with a drop tine. And to this day, I've never had out of all the cameras I've run and everything else, I've never had a legitimate drop tine buck on camera. I've seen some people in the area kill them, but there's other parts like the Golden Triangle of Illinois. For whatever reason, it seems like there's a lot more non-typical genetics there. Still the bluff system, but I've never, maybe someone out there knows exactly what's going on, but I can't put anything on it. This is something I've noticed.
Crazy.
Mm-hmm.
So pivoting to your new place that you got here, you have big plans to try to get something done before hunting season, or what's your plans to get going here?
Yeah. So closed on it 2 weeks ago, and I put in a food plot the weekend I closed on it, and actually worked out. We had awesome rain, was able to get equipment in there, put in about a 2-acre plot right away. And honestly, life has been absolutely insane. And I was waiting for this day to buy a farm my entire life. And I've been so darn busy that I haven't even hung a tree stand on there. I have 5 cameras, and I'm just wanting to disappear from the world for maybe a weekend or two and try to get as much done. But I don't know if that's really going to happen. So the long and short of it is put one food plot in, in a really good location, and then have mentally about 4 spots where I want to hang stands and shotgun some more cameras throughout there. But I have the mental struggle of not pressuring it too much too, and going in there and also having to still get prepared. Maybe you guys have some advice or insight on that, because right now I'm struggling to fly by the seat of my pants or just keep the hammer down and try to get some stuff done.
So you got 2 acres in. I mean, that's a pretty good sized food plot.
Yeah.
What did you plant there?
So I ripped the page right out of Jeff Sturgis's playbook. I did. I planted per acre 50 pounds of soybeans, 100 pounds of Austrian winter peas, and then 25 pounds of oats. And
perfect.
I mean, yeah, hit the rain absolutely perfect. It rained that night. It rained like 4 days after. My cell camera, you can already see all the sprouts coming up. So I think It should be really well established. So that's what I planted. And I mean, that's kind of, I think it should be good. There's a really high stem count on the whole property as well. And so there's going to be a lot of natural food and cover. I think the biggest thing would be, I'd love to try to define the movement a little bit more, but I don't know if that's going to be too intrusive, or just allow the deer to, they're going to navigate the property somehow anyways, just see what it is. And hopefully you're able to capitalize on it. And then if you can't, if there's no advantage to where I'm at in terms of like how they're using the property without getting busted, and then it's going to have to, manipulate that next year. But right now, that's kind of what the plan is. And there's enough topography on the property and enough points that come out that I think probably can cheat the wind on some of those points too. So that's the tentative plan. I don't know. It's just
not a bad plan.
Can only control what I can. And right now, things are just crazy.
I think being year one, maybe observe more, just see what happens. I know some guys will say, go in there and change how you want it to be, because the deer will react and change how you make it. There's other guys who say, stay out for a year, learn what they're doing, and then enhance how they move, steer them a little bit off left or right, or get on that path. I'm more of the latter. And I think that with it being so close to losing velvet, we already saw a buck lose velvet here in Michigan.
Wow.
I saw on Facebook today. You might be better off getting your stands hung and getting a bunch, like 4 nice mock scrapes, some rendered cell cameras on there, and stay the heck out. I mean, at least for year one, you're busy anyways, right? So no point in killing yourself.
Yeah. And I have other farms to hunt. And so it's, it's not the end all be all. And this is the thing that I always tell all the people that buy ground with me and they're all stressed out about the upcoming year. I was like, listen, you could have this piece for the rest of your life. So do not sweat this year and, just figure it out. So I'm trying to take my own advice and just hang out, chill out, and just enjoy and savor the moment is kind of what the goal is.
Brian, what are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, I mean, you covered it. That's a great idea, not to get too crazy the first year. Some of the things that take forever, if you have an idea, like fruit trees or getting some miscanthus established, it takes a few years. But, you don't have to be in a hurry for that either. You have till spring that you can do that. But I think Jared covered it very well. I mean, sit back, enjoy the hunting season, listen to what the deer are going to tell you, and kind of come up with a plan from there.
Yeah. And they have a lot of advantages on this farm right now, the way it is. Like, but my gears are turning and I already have like the mental spring checklist. I'm just hoping that, if I kill 1 buck off there this year, I'm happy. I'm not, if I had 3 sits and I killed the giant on one of those sits, then that's a home run of a year. I'm not, like I said, I have other farms to hunt. That's not, if I want to go hunting, I have other places to go.
Awesome. And speaking of that, let's hear about some of your other farms. You've been hunting that area in Illinois for a while. What are you focusing on habitat wise, or which part of the farm have you figured out over the years is more productive than others? Maybe some of our listeners will take that into account, in farm country where they're at, and think, okay, well, Jake does well here. Maybe I can relate that to some of my farms.
Yeah. So I scooped up a solid lease last year in a really good deer neighborhood. It's not close to home, but it's worth the drive. And I would say this, I'm not able to do really any habitat improvements, but it's an old overgrown cattle farm with a bunch of CRP. Naturally really good. And thankfully the neighbor is a stand-up neighbor and has a lot of habitat improvements. So something like that, I just have to hunt the deer movement and be very strategic. And it sucks when you don't have that destination food source on your farm, but thankfully there's ag nearby as well. So that one, just deer neighborhood, not much I can do. Now, some other small parcels that I do have permission on. One of them was a more open property, and we went in there and actually just like basically clear cut a section of it, about a quarter acre of it. And it's in a really good high travel corridor area. And now, just 2 years later, after doing that cut, I mean, my cell camera is always popping off, and there's some really solid deer in there. And then that butts up to big ag as well. So it's just from where I'm at with ag country, a lot of it is lack of cover, not lack of food. And so the goal typically is to provide more cover, strong security cover, because that's usually not found as easily as, a plethora of ginormous agriculture.
Sure. And when you say cover, what does that look like in your neck of the woods? What sort of trees? Any idea? Are you talking trees or more CRP or standing corn?
It's a mix. I'll say this: with standing corn, there's some farms where the standing corn, it could be a really good early season October. As long as the corn's in, that finger or ditch or small parcel is fantastic. If it's in soybeans, it's garbage. Don't even, really bother spending time there. So in terms of that, that's one thing. Another item is the CRP. Some of the blends are actually, they hold up for a decent amount. Obviously, it's not like a true stand of switchgrass or a true stand of miscanthus. But a lot of it's just thick, nasty, overgrown stuff that was either neglected or purposely manipulated, like that small area that we cleared out just to make it, thick and nasty with, a lot of regeneration, shooting up. So it's a mix of all of them. The one farm that is corn this year, 2 years ago, it was corn, and it was one of those years where the corn stayed in really late, and there was a ton of opportunities if you were in there. The access is an issue, but just a lot of solid deer traveling through the area, bedding in areas that they wouldn't typically feel comfortable with. And it's really just a finger edge or a row. And that's corn again this year. So I'm hoping to capitalize on that biannual pattern to see if some of those deer are doing the same things now that the crops are the same.
Very nice. We talk about those, we call them like wildlife cuts or early successional areas in our land plan services where, Brian, I see those on your plans. I put those on my plans, the ones that we work on together. And it's like that little opening in the woods with early successional forest and the regrowth coming in. It's food, it's cover, it's diversity, it's edge. I mean, you can't lose. I mean, some properties like Ryan's up in Canada, Brian, we recommended a bunch on that one.
Yeah. It helps establish a line of movement too, more predictable line of movement. So yeah, you get 4 or 5 good benefits from just something simple like that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And from where that was before we cut that to where it is now, it is drastically different. And it's a small parcel. It's just a good area. But just that one little thing has made a huge difference. And that's on a small scale to probably what most of your plans are.
Yeah, there's not you say that, there's a piece of state ground right by my house here that was just clear cut. I mean, clear cut. And I drove by it today and I peeked my head in there, and it's like there's like 6 foot of growth, leaves everywhere on everything. And that's like a few months,
Mm-hmm.
It's incredible the amount of food and cover that brings right away. So now I wanted to ask you, I didn't put this on our talking points here, but do you have a story of a buck you killed on one of these properties where you could kind of tell us how it worked out, the terrain he was using, maybe his pattern, and how you were able to capitalize on that?
There's one that comes to mind. It was a permission property, and it was a buck. I got permission on this farm 2019, and this deer was, I don't know, probably 160, 165 inches, really solid deer. And I had no clue how old he was. He just looked really mature. And then could never connect with the deer. I had him in the rut a couple times. Definitely was not a resident buck at the time being. Following year, I never got any velvet pictures of him. And then I actually saw him on the hoof about a mile away on a different farm. I said, oh my gosh, I think that's that deer. And he went drastically downhill, had a bad back hip, like very just key walk, like you could tell who he was. And then I went and hung cameras on basically a lot of ravines, and it's just a creek crossing where all of them pinch down. Just really good natural funnel. Hung the camera there, and there was another deer. I swear, I bet he field dressed 300 pounds, ginormous. I'll just send you a video. I'm just ginormous body deer, bully.
Wow.
And I had to lift 2 on the creek crossing. And then the deer I ended up shooting and ended up being 10 and a half years old. This was hobbled up, just looked like he got the hell beat out of him. And then 10 minutes later, like right at gray light, here comes that giant, hog of a deer, like, strutting basically in buck form. But anyway, so he was in there at the end of October. So I went and set up basically kind of out of the old playbooks, like a third of the way down a ridge, and my scent shooting off this cliff up above where I had him on camera with a lot of predominant doe bedding. And this was November 3rd. And I saw that deer open up a scrape that morning, and I was like, oh my gosh, that's that deer. I'm going to kill him. And so it was like 45 yards away, giant hedge tree down, like this really thick and nasty. And then my sense was shooting over, and I actually grunted him in. He came into that scrape 3 times, and I just kept like faintly bleeding. It's kind of an inside joke in Texas, but like using the extinguisher on the bleak, because he just got his butt kicked. It looked like he looks like hell. Like he does not want to fight anything. He's just looking for a doe. And so I just keep letting out these most faint bleats. And eventually he circled back around this hedge. And then he could not go any further to try to win what was calling, because there was a cliff there. And eventually he stood there for probably 10, 15 minutes, and then he stepped out of the brush, and I smoked him. So that was like the key, using the topography to have the deer, get in a shooting lane. And that worked out really well. And I think sometimes when you talk about Illinois, people don't realize that there's some of those elevation changes, but that's what we did. And it's not big woods. It's not, I'm not trying to make it sound cooler than what it is. It's just some spots that work sometimes.
It's enough. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly.
I appreciate your honesty and pro tip there. I like that, using the extinguisher on bleat. It's funny. I don't know if I've ever told anybody this. One of my secrets is this little guy right here. This is a grunt tube, if you believe it. And in Michigan or some more pressured areas, it sounds like a little tiny buck. It almost sounds like a mallard, like
yeah,
like very, very
faint.
Non-intimidating, right?
Mm-hmm.
So even if you got a buck like that or a situation like that where he might not be the boss of the area in Michigan, if I go rip out that extinguisher and just blow it, not gonna happen. It's too loud, too much, too fast. But something like that, I've killed a buck using this. Using that light action, that very faint sound that that just came to mind. I have all my crap sitting here from cleaning out my backpack. So nice job on that.
Yeah, it's kind of interesting, because I think most people just want to like be the most aggressive caller and do that, but that's what worked, because he wanted to smell or see what was going on there, and you didn't have any more room to go. Now that buck that was whooping his butt, about 7 days later, I saw him on that farm, and I was going to try to kill him too. And I tried everything, and he just did not give a crap. He was locked onto a doe. So I almost went 2 for 2, but it didn't pan out. I wasn't that lucky.
Now, are you using a ton of cameras? I mean, I assume you're using a ton of cameras. You're at Exodus, you work there,
Mm-hmm.
you're part owner. Like, I assume, like, how many cameras are we talking? Like,
I stopped counting around 25 or so. I'm going to guess
Okay.
I'm probably closer to 40.
Okay.
Would be a pretty good guess.
And do you think that, I'm assuming you think it helps, like some guys don't want to rely on cameras and kind of rely on their woodsmanship. Some guys, all they do is rely on cameras because it's giving you the most recent information right there.
Mm-hmm.
What's your thoughts on that?
I've fallen in the trap of relying on cameras too much at times. I'll tell you this, I've learned a lot more by running 40 cameras than I wouldn't have in terms of just areas. We take the soaking approach pretty seriously. There's some farms that I won't even hunt, but I'll just plaster it with cameras, whether it's public or private, or, hey, can I hang some cameras on your farm just for work and just to see what kind of deer are in the area? So, but there's also times where even with cell cameras, or you go and check cameras, you're like, oh, there's nothing on here. And really, you may just be, if you would have checked it a day later, there might have been a mega giant in there. And you just, you're relying on too much. But I've learned a ton by running lift twos on video, just from mannerisms with the different type of deer. And I usually find some giant deer at the end of October every single year. And that's quickly has become my favorite time to be a deer hunter. just because the amount of cameras that I run, and I'm not hunting like my home county. I'm hunting a pretty large area around here.
Yeah.
And so it's cool to find just deer doing almost the same thing, an hour apart.
And
so
real quick, what date, like, is your on swish?
So I've seen this is what usually happens, and I have not nailed it down yet, but I can't wait the day it happens. So usually what happens around like October 17th to the 21st or 22nd, I get a night video of a ginormous buck. And in the past, I would discount it too much and say, oh, he's, all these different things. He's nocturnal. He's just there for that time only and all this other thing. But one thing I noticed was those bucks that show up randomly at that end of the October, or I guess the 17th to the 21st, 22nd, they'll be in daylight on that farm at some point. I almost guarantee it, because I've seen it happen too many times. Now, a lot of times I won't necessarily be right there, but it's usually in association to a community scrape or the best doe bedding in the area. And I've seen that happen year after year. I have not capitalized on it. I've been darn close, and usually when they come back into actually being in daylight, it could even be the 25th, 26th, or it could be closer to that 1st, 2nd, 3rd of November. That's kind of that frame that I've noticed. I'm not a good enough deer hunter to put all the dots together right now, but I have noticed if they show up around that time, do not discount it and don't wait for them to show up, because it's usually too late, because it's a really narrow window. And this is small parcel farm country too. I think it'd be different if you had a bigger chunk to chase them. But I mean, a lot of these areas were literally, one of the farms where I started putting it together was like 5 acres. So it's like you're looking at such a narrow window of data anyways, but that's what I've certainly noticed.
So walk us through your strategy. Say you happen to get on a big buck in an area. What's your next step for trying to backtrack him? Or are you trying to figure out which trails he's using?
I'm trying everything. So I would say typically what's happened, and I'm usually a lot of times it's maybe in the summer, if it's in velvet season, I run pretty much 80% of my cameras in association with scrapes. So if I'm getting them in the summer on a scrape, then I'm circling the 23rd, 24th, 25th in association with the cold front in October to try to hunt that. And that's another thing that I've noticed. In terms of actual strategy, I'm not that good of a deer hunter right now. I just run a ton of cameras. I find a lot of big deer, and every now and then I connect with one. But it's tough because every farm is different in terms of what I've had access to. Some of them are permission, and I share the permission, and there's so many unknown factors. I guess most of it is annual data, figuring out small parcel farms, and learning the windows of when farms are good, because I have some farms that are small and they're red hot for 3 days and they suck the rest of the year. And it's just having that mental catalog of, okay, where do I need to be? Where do I need to be? Where do I need to be? And I'm not targeting a specific buck at this point in my hunting career. And so I've tried and I've been unsuccessful. So it's just being in the best spot that I can be that day, and just going through the ropes and learning through the hard knocks, because I think you can listen to all the podcasts. I've had the privilege of talking to some of the best deer hunters, I think, that walk the face of the earth. I think you just have to get out there and do that. And that's, obviously they cut the learning curve down, but specific knowledge just takes time. And that's something I've acknowledged.
Absolutely. So you said you're running them over scrapes even in the summer for velvet, when they're in velvet. Yeah.
And I've had really good luck with that. In terms of if I had to break down what are the commonalities of what makes it good, it's pretty much those community hub type scrapes. They're usually in association to really good bedding in the area or doe bedding. And that's honestly like the two things. And if you get bucks that are hitting that literally this time of year, for whatever reason, like they'll hit it between the 15th and 17th of October in the daylight. And if they do, then that next cold front around that 23rd, 24th, 25th, 26th. Interesting. That's, to me, when I've seen happen. Now, usually I'm too scatterbrained and I'm trying to do that on 3 different bucks at once. Yeah. But I've seen that happen so many times. My best opportunity for a giant deer the last couple of years have been between the 24th and November 3rd, almost every single year. Sure. Yeah. I've noticed that a lot more as I'm paying attention, like you said, to these guys that are getting it done every year. End of October's really opened up my eyes to paying more attention to that for sure. Mm-hmm.
Now, these scrapes that you're putting these over in the summer, is it stuff that you've had history with, or is something that you found scouting the previous spring?
A mixture of the two. A lot of times it's things that I found in the fall and I was just too late. Maybe I got permission in the summer and it wasn't visible to me. Going to the next year, hanging the camera there for the whole year, and then in the summer, that would be one. Another would be trying to create them. There's one of them on a farm that there wasn't that community hub scrape in a place that I feel like I could really hunt one. There's one on the very edge of the property. It was impossible for me to hunt. So I actually cut that one down and I moved it over about 200 yards in a spot that I still think is good, but I have much better access and the ability to hopefully train them to do that and kill them and have the advantage. So I did that about a month ago. I have a camera over it and I'm excited to check it because I think more than likely whatever bucks are there right now, I'll have an opportunity later in October. So I guess the short of it is trying to figure out how to move it to where I can actually take advantage of it and still, check off the boxes for a deer, but check off the boxes for a deer hunter too.
Now, Jake, when you say move it, walk me through what you did with your process and what it looks like.
Yeah. So the one that I found last year, this is the farm I got access last year. I just cut down the branches so they don't use it this year. And then it's the same bedding structure, same point, but it's just on the very other end of it where I have better access. And it's on the southeast. It's basically with the predominant northwest wind. It's on the downwind side of that bedding already. And there's a small sliver of timber that butts up to that. And so I just created one, try to make it look very attractive, showed a bunch of dirt, and it's along a trail that they already want to use. And I'm hoping that that movement's going to be moved over to where I'm at. And I'm in a really hung a stand in a really gnarly tree. And so I think it should be a killer spot.
Sounds good to me. I mean, I wouldn't
We'll
do much
see.
different than that.
Yeah, we'll see what happens. I'm excited to check that camera. I'm hoping there's some studs hitting it. So, and maybe it won't work at all, but I have a pretty good feeling that it'll work.
So when you run cameras, you said you like to run on video mode. What is that doing for you? I know it takes a lot longer to check your cameras when you're checking a bunch of videos versus pictures, but how much more intel are you getting? Why do you do that?
I do it for work. So a lot of the B-roll for YouTube is from our lift too. The other item is I feel like you get so much more idea of the demeanor of the buck. You get an idea. And to me, you can see the antler so much better too. You can see like, oh, does he actually have a kicker on that? Or was it was it a blurry picture? So you get to see what the bucks are better. You get to see what they're doing. You get to see their mannerisms. And you also get to see where they're going and where they're coming from so much better. And I'm not running them on like 10 seconds. On some of those scrapes, I'm running them 25, 30 seconds long.
Wow.
And you get a lot more information than what you think. And a lot of it is just small items or even the smaller bucks hitting this scrape, but there's the bigger buck in the background, or you can see the one smaller rack buck that's more mature harassing the other one. And that, to me, you just can learn so much more. Now, it does take more time. It takes more battery and everything else. But personally, I think if you did it for like your top tier trail camera locations, it is worth the extra effort and what you'll learn, in my opinion.
Great advice. Great advice. Now, yeah, we're fired up to get the renders out there, get them moving. I still have a few more cameras I need to put out, swap some batteries and whatnot. Mock scrapes still need to go out. I'm a little behind. But yeah, I like that video mode on your top potential areas. Then you can at least focus on those and then let the others soak in other areas. So are all yours on video or just the top areas?
Every single Live 2 is on video mode.
Okay.
Every single one. And it can be a lot sometimes, but it's part of work. I'm not gonna if that's my most strenuous activity for work, I'm not doing too bad. So
Nope.
One interesting thing though, and it was a camera that was on a scrape. Actually, it's the one I just cut down this past year. And it had a doe, and it was one of those late October bucks that was on the other side of the place. And it was the only daylight video I had of them. It was November 3rd. Here comes a doe running by, triggers the camera. And I had another camera on another fence post that was on a corner back. The other camera got a picture of the doe, trigger delay, nothing else. But on the one that I had 30 seconds on, here comes the doe, and here comes that like 190 barreling behind it, barreling behind the doe. And I didn't get it on the other camera. And if that wouldn't have happened, I would have said, I never got a daylight picture of that buck, but it's clear as day. He was on that farm at that time, and I sat dark to dark the day before. It's like, gave up. But that's just, you would have never known. I would have never known that he was actually on that farm in daylight. I would have assumed it, but that's concrete proof. And that was, if it was 10-second video, I wouldn't have got it. It's just some of those little things that, could trip things off. So that's what I've learned, is you learn a lot more. It may be one little clue, but it could be major.
No, and that's awesome. And I think I want to get into another question I had that I haven't given you a heads up on yet. You mentioned something earlier. You guys at Exodus are like the kings of content. I mean, I love it. I watch all your stuff. I was watching last night about midnight. Now you get to talk to, like us, a lot of the greatest deer hunters out there, and you've spent some time with them and interviewed them and asked them all these questions. What would you say are some of the top things that resonate with you and, in common with these guys that, some of our listeners or even us three could take away from that?
Yeah. The one thing that I found the most interesting is when we walked Jeff Sturgis's farm, he always preached switchgrass and screens. And I had an idea what that looked like in my head, or like what that would look like on my farm. And then I went and walked it. Probably 4x of what I pictured, 4 times the amount of what I thought he would do with screening, and stuff where there's even, topography to help block something off. He would still screen it off, where I think most people would not. And they would just use, okay, well, there's the topography, but he screened off so much more than I would have ever anticipated. And, having a farm now, definitely that is in the back of my mind. That's one thing that surprised me, that you listen to it, but until you go see it, it's totally different. The other thing is the specific knowledge of just getting experience under your belt. That's pretty much what all of them say. Like, you can, it just takes time. A lot of these people, if you would have talked to them when they were my age, they wouldn't have the knowledge and expertise of what they do now that they're in their 50s. So I'm recognizing that it's just going to take years and years of practice and learning, and, have the luxury of asking some of these people specific, somewhat selfish questions that are, could potentially help me. So Guilty. Yeah, that's something that I've learned. And it's just kind of like cobbling together all these different hunters, because there's a lot of similarities that they have, but they all have their own kind of twist and things that they do that are just slightly different to other people. But a lot of the times it's just being aggressive when the time is right, and being patient when it's not, and just having the experience to do it. And honestly, almost all of them do not pride themselves on being good shots too. That's something that I've noticed. They're not gearheads. They're not people that are all about their bow setup. There's like, when I point at 25 yards, I hit where I need to, and that's all they care about. That's something I've noticed too.
Yeah, that's a great point. And to your point on the switchgrass, we recommend that a lot on plans for cover. I think it comes back to a lot of cover or sight line or pressure that comes with less stress. But also, like, one thing that I've noticed is cutting. I think I said this on the podcast we did with you guys. I watched some properties here in Michigan where guys have been on it for, 10, 20, 30 years. And the amount that they cut in terms of hinge cutting or felling trees or opening the canopy is just absurd. It's a lot. It's like, oh my gosh, a wrecking crew came through here, so it's just interesting. Maybe it's on the extreme side of things that some of these guys are, or maybe it's what it actually takes, instead of dabbling in it, just jump right in.
True.
I'm not sure yet, but it's pretty interesting to hear you say that. So thanks for that.
One thing I'll say too is there's podcasts where I'm so focused to try to progress the conversation. I get done, I'm like, put a gun to my head and ask me what I said. I have no clue. So sometimes I have to go back and listen to my own podcast to try to retain what we talked about, because I'm so focused on trying to, make things move along smoothly, which always always doesn't work out very well. But that's the other thing I'd say.
No, it's hilarious. It's kind of the reason I started this podcast, is just to be able to record these conversations, because I don't have a great memory. So I'm going to forget half of it anyways. So now I can go back and listen, and it's kind of some of the origins of this, but I appreciate that. Now, I know you guys are running a bunch of different programs this fall. We just got done with Velvet Fest. How that end up going for you guys, and what's next? What should people be looking for with their trail cam pictures next?
Yeah, Velvet Fest was fantastic from a campaign perspective. I was probably about 40% capacity on having my own cameras out, which kind of sucks because I I love this time of year, and I think it's so fun to run cameras just to get pictures of big deer, not necessarily because it's going to help you kill a deer later in the year, but it's just fun. So Velvet Fest was awesome. It was great. The next thing, I guess, in terms of what we kind of have pillar content would be Scrape Week, which was birthed out of my love for, that last part of October. Because it is such an amazing time to be a human being that likes to chase deer, because there's just so much cool stuff going on. You have big deer showing up that, have been gone for a long time, and you're getting them pissed off on scrapes and doing a lot of cool stuff. And I think that's a product of running a lot of cameras on video, is you can definitely like tie into the emotion of like, wow, this is crazy. So that's the next kind of big thing. We try to talk with people that have, great expertise in those times of year. So that's something that we're looking forward to. And then right now it's just, hammering down the schedule that we put out. So it's just, I think usually we're trying to nail 3 YouTube videos a week, 2 podcasts a week. And it's a lot. It's a lot to stay ahead of.
Sure is. Well, I know we're going to continue to work with you guys and get your brand and your products out there in front of our guys, and keep producing the content on our side too. So look forward to seeing what this fall has in store for both of us. And I just want to, wrap up by asking, how can everybody find you and follow along? And then, make sure you hit your real estate stuff too.
Sure. Yeah. So you can find ExodusTrailCameras.com. Podcast is Trail Cam Radio. YouTube's Exodus Trail Cameras. You can find me on Instagram at just Jake Hofer. And the Land Podcast is every Monday. And so we're talking to people that are, first-time land buyers, and also we're going to get some people that are experts in the space on there too. So just a lot of fun stuff. More than likely, if you like deer hunting or you like real estate, there's something that we're producing that you'll enjoy. At least I hope so.
Awesome. And what company are you with the real estate side of things?
Yeah, so I work with Land Pros. So I'm a broker in Illinois, and serve pretty much the north central part of Illinois, licensed to go through the whole state. But a lot of times, if people call me that are outside of my area of expertise, I'll just refer them out. And I said, if I don't think I can truly help you, I'm not you need to be with someone that is an expert in that area. And I'm not here just to string you along to try to get more of a commission check. I'll just refer you to someone that I trust. So that's something I take a lot of pride in.
No, that's awesome. I just want to, thank you for your time today. I know we'll be chatting again in the future, but I also did want to mention, I did mention it on an intro talking about Exodus prior. We do have a discount code with you guys for our land plan clients. So all of our land plan clients, you will be getting an email with this discount code. Some of you have already, and feel free to reach out and discuss with us if you're interested in that service. So Jake, what did I miss? Anything else, buddy?
No, I appreciate the invite. It's a pleasure talking to you guys as always. I'm excited to see what you guys have in store. I know Brian's down working hard, and you're working hard on the day job to pay the bills and get ready for this upcoming fall.
Oh yeah.
It's late August, and deer season's gonna be here so quick. I just hope things slow down a little bit so I can fully enjoy it.
Absolutely.
Yeah, no, I hear you. I'm gonna be I think hopefully it's not too hot this weekend, because the rest of the food plots are going in, guys.
Solid.
It's gonna be
Pray for rain.
I'll get it behind us. Exactly. So, well, thanks again for tuning in, everybody, and I appreciate it, Jake. Thank you.
Thanks,
Thanks, Jake.
Awesome.